Hello and welcome to Storyboard18. We have with us today Lokesh Suji, Director, Esports Federation of India and Vice President of the Asian Esports Federation. He's here with us to tell us about the exciting space of esports in India and its immense potential. We know, as per a recent EY report, that the esport market size in India is about to touch about rupees 11 billion by 2025, and the potential of economic value is around rupees 100 billion between now and 2025. We'll go over to Lokesh for more details. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lokesh. Tell us a little bit about where we are in terms of adoption and how popular is esports in India now that we have seen this extreme surge in traffic in the last 2 years.
So thank you, Tasmai. Thank you for having me here. It's always good to talk to you. You're right that when we talk about the surge on video games and thanks to COVID, and then subsequently, obviously, the internet and the smartphone penetration, it's very encouraging. And specifically, when I talk about adoption of esports, so when I'm talking about esports, I'm talking about certain set of genres of video games which fall under the category of esports. So two things, one is definitely the adoption of video games increased. Again, thanks to COVID, because people had a lot of time. It was a good family time together. So instead of, let's say, going out and traveling to offices, people or families used to sit together and play, simplistic of the games like, let's say, Ludo. And Ludo definitely, was quite successful. And similarly, when we look at our esports titles, there are good esports titles on mobile. Take for example, Free Fire Max or Call of Duty Mobile, and of course, PUBG and so-called the Indian version of PUBG, which is BGMI. The penetration and adoption very rapidly increased because of obvious reason that people had a lot of time in their hands, and they were able to engage with not only their friends but outside their friend circle. Because when you play these kind of games do have a provision wherein you can set up a private lobby or a public lobby wherein you engage and interact with gamers across the country. So adoption of esports per se has increased. If we are on the safest side of it, when we look at esports game titles largely on mobile, we have somewhere around 350 million users within India, and that's a massive number. And obviously, we see a lot of gap in the terms of mobile esports or game titles on mobile, and in comparison to, let's say, a PC or a console, there is definitely a huge gap because mobile is a affordable device today. Every or any youngster, typically seventh, eighth, or ninth, tenth, they would typically have a mobile phone or a smartphone wherein these gamers or so-called esports athletes engaged in these game titles.
Since we are talking about, you mentioned TG of millennials, we are talking about youngsters, we are talking about that age group. That is also the age group that the modern day marketer is very interested in. And esport is becoming an attractive option for brands as well. So, if you can expand a little bit on the opportunity for brands in esports.
So definitely, any or every brand, whether you are a new age brand or a legacy brand, these brands definitely want to reach out to this TG. There are multiple ways. One of the easiest or the traditional ways wherein these brands used to engage with video gamers was in the terms of ad networks. But the way we look at it is it's a very intrusive kind of engagement. Largely you will see if you're playing a video game, you will see some banner coming up or some scroll coming up saying that you buy this, you do that. That's a very intrusive way of doing it. But I think there are a lot of engaging ways wherein a brand can engage with this particular TG. But I think the easiest way is to kind of build your own esports IP. So that is one. Second is in the terms of, let's say, a brand can, let's say, sponsor a particular team for a particular game title, or let's say a particular team which is got teams and various game titles. So that is second. Third is that as a brand they can engage or they can come on board as a partner or a sponsor with a existing esports IP. Fourth, and I think that's where it is very critical from a market like India. See, as a brand, it will be always good if your approach towards esports athletes or this particular community is very authentic, and it should be very genuine kind of approach. Wherein, as a brand, you can, let's say, you can set up, training centers. That is a need of the hour as far as India is concerned. Let's say, we set up, a training or a coaching center wherein these gamers can come. Obviously, these trainings can be offline or online, whichever way. So wherein, let's say, we get best of the coaches or best of the trainers who come, let's say, from India or outside India, and they kind of help our Indian esports athletes to upskill themselves. See, there is no doubt as far as the talent of our esports athletes are concerned, but typically, what we have realized is that somewhere, we miss out on the skill or that particular trick of that particular game which is required to participate and win at the international level. So that is the fourth part of it. Fifth is obviously, as a brand, you can come on board with the federation as a partner. So not only in the terms of, let's say, setting up these training centers, whatever activities we do, whatever international or domestic participations which we have, conferences is a good way to, engage with the audience. And well, I think these are the pretty much good ways wherein you can engage with our esports community. See, there is a difference. If you just, we have seen that a lot of brands typically would, let's say, have some in-game branding and all those things. But very honestly, RTG is not a normal video gaming community, who would come there to just say, let's say, casually pass time and go away. Our esports audience is a very hardcore kind of, big fans, enthusiasts for esports. So the way we should look at is, not in the form of in-game advertisement, maybe one of the options or one of the, let's say, five things which you want to do with the esports community. That may be one of the line item, but it should not be the first or the second. It should be typically on the last bit of it. So these are certain set of ways wherein a brand can engage and make their and sound and look their engagement very authentic and genuine.
Interesting thing, Lokesh, time and again, you have also spoken about the importance of content and how content is king, right? Even in the esports genre. So, tell me, how is content driving the growth in this space? And how are
So
marketers, especially, using content as a medium?
So content, that's a very interesting part of it, because if we today look at our content creators in the esports or the video game side of it, it's very interesting. I think these are the people who are actually leading the show as far as our esports is concerned. You would see that maybe an esports athlete is not making that much money, but if you look at an esports content or a video game content creator, he's making much 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 more money through sponsorships and brand engagements and things like that. So that is where the content creation, typically in our case, how does the content creation look like? We have certain set of, we call them as streamers, or and the subset of that is, let's say, we call them as influencers. But I think the core lies in the live streaming bit of it. All these video gamers, typically, let's say if I talk about a game like Call of Duty, or in India's scenario, I think it will be more relevant if we talk about a game like BGMI, right?
Mhm.
So a video gamer or a gamer per se, he would, stream. These guys will stream their live gameplays on platforms like, let's say, a YouTube or a Facebook, and then there are, certain set of Indian live streaming platforms also. And that is where you would see that these guys start building their fan base. So typically in this case, as a content creator, you are, it's not necessary that you have to be best in the game, but it's become, so you transform from, let's say, a gamer to an entertainer. And that is where the transformation happens. So if you're able to kind of engage and keep your audience and your fans engaged while you're playing your game, whatever game you're playing, so that is where typically you start building your fan base. And as the fan base increases, and that is where typically the brands would come on board and they would want you to kind of endorse a particular product or talk about a particular product. Or let's say the best case scenario is if you're playing or streaming some gameplay, you would have their product display,
Mhm.
uh, let's say if somebody is powered by, let's say, a Samsung monitor, or let's say a, some watch or some mobile, so he'll say that, I'm playing this game on this particular mobile, and things like that. So that is where, so this transformation happens, and you start building your fan base, and once you reach a particular level, and that is where typically you would also kind of transform into an influencer. Now in our case, it's a very liquid state in the terms of, a big live streamer and an influencer. But that is how the transformation happens, and that is where typically, and absolutely, so as a brand, if for example you pick up, let's say, a mortal kind of a guy, right, or let's say Carrie Minati, of course, right, but let's say if you are talking about mortal, right, so mortal has got certain sort of a fan base, whenever he live streams his gameplays, so he is, so you'll have massive, live spectators who would come on his stream. So, while these guys stream, there is a provision wherein, as a live spectator, I can actually, give a donation to, let's say, Mortal. Or, a very simplistic thing is I can ask Mortal to give me a shout out, and, I'll pay, let's say, I will donate, let's say, 100 rupee or a 200 rupee or whatever I want to. And then I'll ask Mortal to kind of, give me a shout out. So that is, so those are the things wherein, typically the content creation happens in our this thing. And the brands are definitely looking forward to it, because you would see that the best of the championships or the esports tournaments in India may not garner that kind of a viewership, wherein you would see that a live streamer or a content creator, he does it in a one single stream. So content is the king. Similarly, if a new mobile game or any game comes in, the game developer would typically reach out to all these live streamers, and that is where typically these guys will stream, and because they've got a massive fan following, and typically these fans are very loyal kind of fans, and that is where a live streamer has a big impact, and that is where we are seeing that the brands are engaging with the live streamers.
So, whenever we are talking about esports, it is very difficult to ignore the conversation and ignore all the debate and discussion that is going around regulations in the space. So, tell us what's happening on that front. And two is that lack of regulation, is that a deterrent for advertisers and marketers in the or investors for that matter in the space?
This is a very interesting question. I think most of my time will go into answering to this particular question. So yes, so that's absolutely right. So largely, I know, we have seen the time wherein people used to call, fantasy or a team patti, rummy, poker kind of apps or activities as esports. Thankfully, and thanks to the market and thanks to the people involved, ultimately they realized, and a lot of our hard work also went behind this, wherein we were able to differentiate or help people understand that, if you play fantasy, or if you are casually playing a video game, or team patti, rummy, poker, and things like that, or simply for that matter gambling, right? Now gambling is banned in India, but or betting, or so both gambling and betting are banned in India. But people used to think that this is esports, but that is not. And very clearly, again saying it for everybody's benefit, is that if you are involved into fantasy, if you're playing casual video games like let's say a Ludo or a Candy Crush, or playing Team Patti, Rummy, online gaming per se, or gambling or betting, that is not esports. So there are only, for an easy understanding, there are only five genres of video games which fall under the category of esports. So esports, when we specifically talk about esports, so esports world over is recognized as a sport. Thanks to Olympic Council of Asia and International Olympic Committee, they have already recognized esports as a sport. And esports is a medal sport this time in 2022 Asian Games. It was a demonstration title in 2018, wherein we got a bronze medal for the country. And so esports is a sport. So like cricket, right? So cricket is a sport, or let's say hockey is a sport, or athletics is a sport, javelin is a sport. So similarly, esports is a sport, and it has to be handled the way any other sports is handled in our country and across the world. So that is as far as the esports is concerned. But now the second thing is, in the terms of the regulations, I think the problem per se lies in the fact that we have a very old the Public Gambling Act 1867 or something like that. So that's a very old act, and some, obviously, that was a time wherein we used to call it or they used to call it as gaming, and eventually, internet came in and everything, was called as a online gaming. Now, world over, things like, let's say, betting, gambling, team pati, rummy, poker, fantasy, and things like that, they are categorized as iGaming. So that is the right word to be used for, these kind of apps wherein you're playing, whatever you're playing, you're putting in some stakes and, participating in these kind of applications, or so-called, Teen Pati, Rummy, Fantasy, etc. So I think the law somewhere needs to change. They need to remove this online gaming with, let's say, something, which can be an appropriate word for that can be iGaming, the way it is called, worldwide. Or let's say within India, we have a new definition which is called as real money gaming. So, whatever is the best, I'm sure, our legal, infrastructure, or legal authorities will do a good job there in the terms of defining the way wherever they deem to be fit. So this clarification and this misunderstanding definitely has created a lot of problem. Definitely, it has impacted all the industries per se, and including our esports. It has been very detrimental, specifically from an esports perspective, because a lot of these things come up. A lot of these brands don't want to get associated to the moment we say that, this particular application is banned or not banned in a particular state and things like that. But as I said, esports is a sport, so people are also, trying to confuse and call esports as a game of skill. So if esports is a sport, so for cricket, do we call cricket as, let's say, a game of skill? For cricket, we say that, it's a sport. There is no question which arises in the terms of, whether it's a game of skill or chance or whatever. We don't even call it as a game of skill. So similarly, why are people confusing everybody by saying that esports is a game of skill or game? But obviously, it's not a game of chance, but they're trying to fit esports into game of skill. So there is definitely a lot of confusion going around in the market, and similarly, unfortunately, there are multiple federations which have popped up. There were a couple of them which already existed. I'm sure these guys are doing good job, but unfortunately, we are also aware that a lot of, other, new federations would also come up around gaming or online gaming or esports or whatever it is. So I think all of these things ultimately is a deterrent to whatever sector you come from, whether you come from iGaming or RNG sector or from a esports sector. It's definitely detrimental, because typically, if I specifically, talk about esports side of it, a lot of brands want to engage and they want to build up their long term strategies. But just because of these things happening, which brand would want to get associated to something wherein, let's say, tomorrow somebody says that, there was a esports cafe per se, or a esports gaming cafe where people gamers were playing a game like, let's say, a FIFA or a Counter Strike or a Dota, and police came in and they raided that particular thing. So it's very unfortunate things to happen, and, brands don't want to associate with these things. But slowly and steadily, brands are also, it's a new thing for the brands per se, and the brands are also learning. They are also they're still on the path of their learning curve, and eventually. I think it's important. Now is the time wherein our, at least the Ministry of Sports, because esports is a sport, you have the pinnacle body or the apex body for sports, which has, already said that esports is a sport, and I think that at least the Ministry of Sports should, kind of recognize esports as a sport, and that is where obviously ESFI, has we have submitted their application and everything, so they should to immediately kind of do that. There is no, reason for them not to do it, and at least, as far as the esports side of the things is concerned, that will open up. And the moment, the government does it, it automatically, whatever numbers you're talking about, these numbers are definitely achievable. And very soon, the moment government does it, let's say Ministry of Sports recognizes esports and ESFI, it will open up, just like cricket. Cricket standalone, I don't know the numbers, but cricket standalone, is a massive industry in itself. Like, if I'm not wrong, I think KKR or some, all of these franchises are already touching $1 billion valuations. So a lot of these things will automatically happen. But yeah, till the time that thing happens, these confusions, people will keep on writing articles whatever way they want to, and they want to think fit, they will do it. But ultimately, I think, all those things are detrimental to the whole industry per se. Forget, I'm not just not talking from a esports perspective, but I think at large, it creates a lot of confusion. There has to be a regulation. See, the problem is, I'm specifically talking from a video game industry, because esports is a subset of video games. Unfortunately, in India, we don't have a video game industry association or a federation, whatever we might, or a body per se. That is a big gap. So I think uh, the need of the hour today is that we should, now we have, let's say, bodies representing, let's say, a poker or a fantasy, or let's say, RNG side of these things. But one big gap which has existed is that we don't have per se a video game industry body. When I say video game, I'm talking about games like, let's say, GTA or a Candy Crush or FIFA and things like that. So that is a big gap. But again, I would not shy away from agreeing to what you said. These things are very deterrent till the time government, and I think it's a good thing that at least government has taken that initiative. Modi ji uh, is so I remember a time wherein in one of the address to the parents. He said, one lady came up and she said that his son plays a lot of these games, and that is where Modi ji said that, oh, your son plays PUBG wala hai kya, and those things, and transforming from that part to statement which he made very recently, that India has got a massive potential as far as the video game industry is concerned. Please mind it, I'm again saying video game industry. Whenever he says and talks about gaming and other things, so he's talking about video games per se. And obviously, the subset to that thought is that obviously Nirmala ji, taking that initiative in the terms of announcing that AVGC sector task force would be set up, and it was very quick of our government that we now have this particular task force which is set up, which has got a 90 days mandate to come up with their recommendations. And obviously, the people in that task force are renowned industry stakeholders, and ministries are also involved. You got All India, I think the technical education ministry, that they are also involved, information broadcasting and things like that. I think that's a good move. And slowly the government has realized that this particular industry, whichever way, see, in our case also, when we specifically talk about video games, it is also very important that we should have our own rating system. Unfortunately, whatever games we play, they typically would come with a PEGI or a ESRB rating. So these are all UK and US based rating mechanism for video games. I think India is a powerful country. Whether we talk about internet penetration, the way we are today, I think we should have our own set of rules. We should come up with, and I'm sure our task force will come up with those kind of recommendation also, wherein we set up our own rating mechanism for these video games, because this will help us in addressing a lot of nuances of video games per se. We see obviously some people call video games as an addiction. There have been certain set of deaths around playing a particular game. So all those things need to be regulated. It should not be a case wherein you come up with your video game and you don't have those kind of means and mechanisms wherein you are not able to protect your users. So these things are very, very important. And once obviously a policy or a document is framed out specifically for a video game industry, largely these are the things which should be covered under that. It will really help in streamlining the whole industry. It always helps. If you are, it's all unstructured. And again, coming back to the same point, it's very unfortunate that we, while whatever numbers we talk about, even from a video game perspective, we don't have a video game industry body in India yet. Established video game industry body. So things will shape up. Thankfully, things are moving in the positive direction. Sooner or later, we will have all those things, and eventually, then we will be able. But the sooner it should happen, the sooner the better.
So we have seen the huge surge in traffic. We have seen new operators coming in, new businesses shaping up. What's next? What are the highlights for 2022 when it comes to the esports space? And where is the next bout of growth going to come from in the segment?
When we talk about, let's say, operators, so we don't have operators now. That is where typically operators are for RNG or iGaming sector. For us, it's typically one, in our case, when we talk about video games or esports, we have let's say, first and foremost, we have esports athletes, the people who participate in these tournaments, or they play multiplayer and things like that. Second is, of course, we have tournament organizers. Then we have people and organizations who are specializing in, let's say, live broadcast of all those things. Then we have team owners, right? While we talk about esports athletes, then we have esports, or team owners per se. Then we have marketeers, who specialize into how to kind of market, esports or a team and things like that. Then we have, a subset could be, let's say, a legal side of it, and let's say sales side of it, because then, if you have a product or if you have built an IP, then you need specialized business development or a sales team to kind of go out and sell those properties and generate sponsorships and things like that. So largely that's the ecosystem. But I think while in India, from an esports perspective, a lot of these tournament organizers have come up, which is good. There is some kind of a sustainability or a consistency in the terms of these tournaments has started happening. Lockdown has opened up. We very recently, I think, a couple of LAN events also happened, which is very good. And now the next thing, while let's say we have all these events happening, unfortunately, these events happen only for the invited teams. That is again a big gap in the terms that they should typically be an open for all kind of tournaments. But largely, the growth for us would come in at a, let's say, grassroots level. Wherein, let's say, we are taking these esports to, let's say, colleges, schools, and C and T category cities, and that is where the talent will come up. Like, take for example, while we did our the national esports championship to select the team for Asian Games, we had Ayan, who is from a very remote town in West Bengal. Nobody would have heard that name, and we are very confident, and that is the belief which we have, that more such talent will come up from these remotest of the areas, and that is where the potential lies in the terms of, let's say, engagement and things like that. But while this is happening at, let's say, at the ground level, or at the operational level, largely the growth will come up from, let's say, new startups coming up and building certain set of applications or products around esports. I think augmented reality is again a good prospect, wherein these kind of games will come up, wherein you can actually physically, let's say, if you are playing a game of FIFA, right? FIFA is a video game, and let's say if it is kind of converted into an AR kind of a module, and then you actually are playing. You actually use your legs to kind of hit a ball, and so that is where typically you'll see that. And of course, now people are very gung-ho about metaverse per se, but video gamers were already in a metaverse. We already had so-called NFTs and things like that. So it's good that we'll see larger adoption of the metaverse, or let's say so-called NFTs, and that is where largely the growth will come in as far as the esports or the video games. And obviously, not to forget that thankfully we are seeing a lot of our Indian video game developers getting support in the terms of, let's say, funding and VC interest that is generated, and I think it will be good to see. No wonder we'll have some of the exciting video game titles for esports also.
Thank you so much, Lokesh, for joining us on this chat today.